Welcome to the I Create Daily podcast. I'm Leora Alderson.
And I'm Devani Alderson. We're your co-hosts on this journey of creativity and productivity.
I Create Daily is for artists in every genre of creating, from musicians to writers, crafters to inventors, bloggers to entrepreneurs. I Create Daily is a movement for creators serious about your art.
If you're into creating anything, this podcast is definitely for you. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Hello and welcome to another episode on the I Create Daily podcast, a movement for creators serious about their art. Today's episode is a coffee break where we talk about ideas, people, and concepts that inspire us. And of course, because it's almost December and almost 2019.
At the time that we're recording this.
We're going to be talking about life goals and goals in general.
And you are?
I'm Devani.
And
Did I say that?
No, that's okay. And I'm Leora. And yes, so we've been talking about this a lot, as perhaps many people have been. And we tend to be a little bit of, well, not a little bit, a lot along the lines of rebels and renegades when it comes to following traditions and holidays and
just a little bit.
And like the shoulds of society in a way. And I think many creatives can relate, and it's sort of like nonconformist relative to, having to be and do things a certain way. In fact, I think we should, I know I'm going a little off track from the life goals, but it's sort of like the concept of, you remember on the notes I was saying, we should do a coffee break about to not worrying about doing or not doing based on what people say or what the world says. Yeah. So
like how everybody's talking about goals right now, including us.
Yes. So it isn't like doing it because you should, because it's New Year's.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing. It's like, and we have content on this.
And what should you do?
Right. Right. And we have content on this that we'll link to that we did around this time last year. And it's the concept that no matter when you're hearing this, every day is the beginning of a new year. And that's such an important concept because, and I think many people fall into this category, and I certainly did for many years. And that is like the concept of always pushing until certain event or certain date, what it is or when it is that you're going to start doing some of the things that really matter. Mm-hmm. Whether it's, I'm going to wait until January 2nd, probably not January 1st, but January 2nd to start the diet. And then getting on with that, or to get fit, or to start your business or your business idea or whatever, or we're going to go on a vacation. So that's when I'll start working on my health and my body.
And I think the hardest part with that kind of thinking too is that it's always dictated by whoever has set the tone. Like January 1st was set by the calendars and the people who decided those, and who decided January 1st, and who decided that we celebrate these things on these days, or that we put extra emphasis on specific days. It's like another layer of just other people putting their input on when we quote should do something.
Yes. And so instead of, and regardless of whoever it is that did, what matters is what we choose to do with our life when we choose to do it, based on what's important to us. And which ties back in again with the concept of life goals. And just a little, so continuing on that segue on the shoulds for a minute, like I remember seeing years ago when I used to watch Oprah, even like before she was hugely popular, although I'm sure she was well on her way.
When was she not? I don't remember her not being
right, true. Well, she had somebody on her show, of course she was still very popular then, but she had somebody on her show who were talking about fashion. And it was like, they said, the things that you should and shouldn't do for fashion. And, of course, we see that in the magazines and the tabloids all the time on the covers. I don't know about the inside because I don't open them. And I try not to even look at the covers, but on occasion you'll see the things you should never wear, you should, always wear. Well, this particular fashion person was saying you should never wear white shoes after September. Well, I think I have a little bit of an advantage in being out of the mainstream because I grew up in Hawaii, and, it's like okay, so fashion is shorts, and a tank top or a Hawaiian shirt,
whatever you can take off and go onto the beach with as quickly as possible.
And be comfortable and casual. And it's like, we had rubber slippers, it's like, which flip-flops, we call them rubber slipper. And so I had flip-flops, and you had your everyday flip-flops, and then you had your dress flip-flops, essentially it's like, there was just there was no fuss around, attire and all the formalities of those kinds of things, or what kind of car you drove or where you worked. I'm sure some people in every environment, in every society, is interested and concerned about those things. We certainly were not growing up, and that was very refreshing to me, and I still hold to that today. But it's sort of like, again, the concept is like, well, who decided that you should never wear white shoes after September, and who judges whether that's right or wrong?
Yeah.
And I think that many in our crowd can appreciate that.
Especially when one of the main 3 colors in the Christmas holiday is white.
Yeah, and but I think it had to do with the white being summery.
Yeah.
But, there was another conversation with somebody that at one point, it was like, one of my favorite fonts was the Comic Sans fonts. And it's like, when I was using Comic Sans, I got like razzed for using that. And I'm sure and I'd never heard of this thing that you don't use Comic Sans anymore, because that's so outdated and so old fashioned.
The internet can be so annoying because it brings to attention all the random things people think and glom onto.
Well, and it was one of the reason I liked it early on, it was one of the few fonts at that time that was not so formal, and that was a little more casual and a little more like handwriting, and there weren't that many choices back then. And I had no idea, because I just don't tune into these things of the shoulds and the shouldn'ts, and when things are outdated, and when it's just like, it's not a part of my world, and this is which really is such an important concept, because who should decide what's important in your world is you, and so who decides what your life goals are is you, and when you should start them. Not any specific calendar date, or concept or person outside. I mean, obviously, when you're in relationship with people, you have to coordinate. And when you're in marriages, it's hard to, people don't always grow evenly. Like one person in the marriage might become interested in something that the other one isn't interested in, or one person is interested in growth and self-development and the other one isn't. And if you have a good relationship, you can talk those things through and work them out, and coordinate. But if not, then it can be a very uncomfortable time. But that aside, when it comes to otherwise deciding, it's still ultimately your life, because you can't, no matter your relationship, you can't not become who you're compelled to become based on what someone else is saying or doing. In fact, we just had a wonderful interview with the lovely Ingrid Sanchez. She's a watercolor artist, of the Nth degree. She makes incredibly beautiful art and work. And so I don't know if her episode will air before this, but we'll definitely link these two to each other. And, so it's like, where was I going with that?
Nobody decides.
Nobody decides, but I forgot the point. Sorry. Hopefully I'll come back to that. Okay. Yeah. Well, it was because it was not a part of her family. Art was not a part of her family. She had doctors and lawyers, and those were the professions in her family. And to be an artist just wasn't even an option. Mm-hmm. And so it's one that she left. And I'm sure many people in our audience can relate. We've heard these stories already, that art was just not something you did to make a living. And so those are things that so maybe it's not traditional and not mainstream, and may not be the easiest thing, but there's still many people making a living doing that. And those who make a very generous living, or a very comfortable living doing anything, they have to work at it. Yeah. So whether it's art, or whether it's lawyering or doctoring, or being a CEO or secretary entrepreneur, it requires work. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And being
craft driven, whether you're an entrepreneur running a business and that's your craft, because that's definitely a skill. Yes. Whether you have a career that you're very passionate about and you consider that your art and craft, and you bring your all to the table, whether you're an artist getting started or a writer, it's really about developing the time, honing the craft of embodying what that success looks like to you. Because it's not about the money at all, but it is about sustaining the goals that you want. And so I know Gary Vee's been talking a lot about Gary Vaynerchuk. If you don't tune into him, he's been talking a lot about how to be in the quote 1% in the United States, part of the 1% group of people, you don't actually need to be making $1 million. Or
the top 1% of wealthy, financially wealthy people.
Right.
Basically, that 1% begins at like something like 440,000.
Right. Like that's not being a millionaire,
right.
And yet you can sustain an artistic lifestyle,
right.
or sustain the craft you're honing and developing. And so it's sort of like figuring out what you want to develop by doing it.
Yes, and exactly. And so, back to the life goals concept, it's like, so because we're talking along this, a lot of things here. One is around, don't follow the crowd, follow your heart and follow your dreams. And if you don't know those, don't worry, because you're in the majority. If you are not yet tapped in, if you're not yet tapped into your dreams, and it's likely because you've never been encouraged to pursue them, or develop them. And so don't worry. And again, the interview that we'll be sharing with Ingrid Sanchez, one of the ways that most of us discover it, in other words, most people don't necessarily start out knowing it, or at least connected to that knowledge. We discovered it along the way. It is in the journey that the way becomes more clear. And so as we pursue things, and it's like, again, back to Gary Vaynerchuk, Tom Bilyeu says this as well of impact theory, and that is the concept that we have to experience a lot of things in life. Mm-hmm. And it is in the life experiences that we discover the things that really ignite us and light us up, and are the places that when we can do that, or places or things that when we can do that, it isn't work. It is just something that we love doing.
Yeah. And even if a lot of times goals we'll set a goal and then we'll get involved and then we'll realize maybe achieving this goal isn't necessarily what I'm after. What I'm after is the experience of developing something new. Mm-hmm. Like we have a friend who, she really enjoys the process of buying websites and fixing them. She loves that process, and she doesn't necessarily want to keep the website forever. She's perfectly happy once it's a good ranking website on Google, selling it.
Sorry about that.
That's when Siri interrupts you on the podcast. Anyway, she doesn't necessarily care about keeping the website forever. It's not like she's building a brand around the website, but she loves the process of making something better.
Yeah, exactly.
And honing that skill.
Yes.
And so sometimes the goal is not necessarily this end destination. Sometimes the goal for people is to constantly be developing skills around things. And I think that's especially good for I don't want to make it about age, but sometimes that can be good if you're younger and you're like, well, there's so many things to do. Yes. I don't know what I'm passionate about. I could be passionate about anything, and it could change from day to day.
That's okay.
I'm 23, and I still find things that are like, oh, this is interesting and fascinating, and then a week later, I'm like, not so much. But it's about trying new things and developing areas that constantly add to your skill set.
Absolutely. And for some of us, it might be that the thing that lights us up is to constantly experience and try new things throughout the entire lifetime. So like for us, we like to do a lot of different things. And so that would certainly speak to some of you as well. And so part of what the phone interruption was, there was Siri, is that we have an appointment coming up. So we can make this part 2, but let's close with this thought. And that is the concept that when you're trying to identify your life goals, and if you're not sure what they are, remember back to the things that most engaged you when you were a child, the things that you were most drawn to, the things about that people would say about you, like Devani always used to love to do XYZ, or, Susan used to always like to, and was always lost in her dreams of playing, fashion designer, whatever it might be that, that you, and it could even be, Johnny was always playing with rocks. Well, maybe he would end up becoming a gemologist, or interested in painting on stones, or interested in
archaeology.
Yeah, exactly. You never know. So they're begin to tap into and try and remember what it is that lit you up when you were little. Those
early impressions.
Those early impressions.
And not everybody has them.
Yes.
But I think if you can start tapping into sort of like that quote, who are you before the world told you what to be?
Yes.
Like if you can start even just tapping into what kind of energy you felt around certain activities, whether it's the thing or not, just like when you felt more energetic and alive and ready to go.
Yes. Yes. And so don't worry about if you don't know. And if you do know, then make a commitment to yourself to begin pursuing that, if you aren't already, that which you love, and identify where it is you would like to be at the end of the year. To set life goals begins by setting goals in the day, in the week, in the month, in the year, because it is through the day. The day is the way to achieve your dreams and to get where you want to go. It is the only way, because that is where we are. We are in the day. And it doesn't begin on January 1st. It doesn't end on December 31st. It doesn't, it
starts when you decide.
Exactly. That's a good one. Your dreams start when you decide, and to embark on that journey. So thank you for joining us for this coffee break on iCreateDaily.com. We will be continuing this topic and this discussion on identity. This one is more like identifying life goals and considering life goals, and not buying into the mainstream vision or ideas or opinions in particular of what you should or shouldn't do. Or should or shouldn't wear, or should or shouldn't celebrate. But yes, but just begin to, because again, all of that was created when there were fewer options, and there were fewer people controlling the many, and now it's more about the individual and individual expression. And when you think about the garden and how there are so many flowers and so many different vegetables, like used to be, the vegetable options at the supermarket were very limited. We didn't have spring mix and arugula and spinach and super greens and all these different,
and wheatgrass
and all these different options. We had big head of iceberg lettuce, and that was about it. For those of you old enough to remember that, there were so few options, and now there is so many, and the ones that we see now of the many are still just a fraction. And the same thing applies to possibilities for you, your future, and the ways to express your dreams and visions. So thanks for tuning in. Look forward to hearing from you. Write to us at creators@iCreateDaily.com. Oh, and Devani, we have our new mugs. This is the I Heart Daily mug, rather.
With the art emphasized.
The art emphasized.
It takes heart for art.
That's right.
This is I Create Daily, and it has on both sides.
And you can find these on our website through our store category.
And if you're listening to the audio experience of this, then you should hop over to YouTube and listen to the YouTube version, because it has the actual visuals.
Or go to the site and look at the shop. So thank you for joining us. We look forward to hearing from you and what your goals and dreams are. If you need any help and just want to talk it out loud, send us an email.
Okay. All right. The day is the way.
The day is the way. Thanks so much for joining us for the I Create Daily podcast. Please let us know what creatives you would like us to interview and what topics you would be interested in hearing more about.
And if you enjoyed this show, please leave a review on iTunes. We value your feedback. We read all the reviews, and it just helps us get the word out on the I Create Daily podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.